So you don't require a certain 2.5 centimeter length of liver biopsy as you need in proper assessment of liver biopsy. So just collect a blood sample and you get the result. Hospital stay is usually none, and there are usually no contraindications, and the cost is pretty low. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Habib Jadoon, presenting in a detailed description of markers of fibrosis and chronic hepatitis. Now I request Dr. Mohammed Saleh. He is going to present pathophysiology of NASH.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum. This topic is probably a little more important as it follows by Bilal Hamid to tell you about the treatment options. I'll quote to Albert Einstein, if I'm not getting it wrong, who says that if you cannot make it simple, you have not understood it. So I don't know whether I'll be doing it justice or not. So we know that NAFLD is the accumulation of fats in the liver with ballooning of the hepatocyte, which is seen pathologically. And we also know that lipotoxicity is the main pathophysiology associated with NASH initiation and progression. We do know how to fatten the liver, and it's almost 2,500 years or so. But we don't know probably yet that how it gets fattened. This is duck liver, they would use to. So the exact pathogenesis is still elusive. However, we do know the processes leading to NASH, and we do know that they are multifactorial. There's no one factor. And these are all those things which interact. The few, like genetics, they are like the fixed one. There are certain others which one may modify or one can target. So in a genetically susceptible host, combination of these would lead to fatty liver disease. This is basically the basic pathogenesis of NASH or fatty liver disease, where we routinely say the first hit when there is the metabolic syndrome or overnutrition, insulin resistance, and would lead to accumulation of fat in the liver. Steatosis sets in, and then there is an interaction, an activation, expression, and interactions of the death receptors and the presence of cytokines, adipokines, reactive species, and apoptotic pathways, and would lead to progression of NASH, which further would lead to again more insulin resistance and accumulation of fat. And then there is this third hit as well, and would progress with the line, if you cannot halt it, to fibrosis, severe form of fibrosis, cirrhosis, and even NHCC. Now what plays a role? We do know that certain genetics are involved, polymorphisms, overnutrition. But however, we also know that there is a non-obese fatty liver, which is a known entity, more so in Asia. The lean NASH we call, or sarcopenia to be specific. Insulin resistance and obesity, lipotoxicity, then inflammatory cytokines and inflammasomes. Our own innate immunity plays a role, and down-regulated autophagy also. And then this apoptosis. And at the end, we do also know that farneside receptors plays a role in this homeostasis. So we will address few of them. For genetics, there are certain polymorphisms which we know are associated with NAFLD, NASH initiation and progression, histological severity, and not only this, but also with the development of hepatocellular carcinoma. And we do not know how exactly they work, but we do know that some of them are involved in the very low density lipoproteins export, and their dysfunction leads to hepatic steatosis. The overnutrition, everybody probably knows this one, that this would lead to increased de novo lipogenesis, would lead to increased free fatty acid influx, which would incite inflammation and would lead to insulin resistance in the liver and other tissues as well. However, it's not only overnutrition, it's the sarcopenia or the body composition which will play a role. And the loss of skeletal muscle mass or a disproportionate fats to the muscle would lead to reduction in insulin signaling action, which would lead to insulin resistance. And it would do two things. Gluconeogenesis using amino acids or proteins would lead to further sarcopenia, and lipolysis, which would lead to increased free fatty acid as well. So this will then deposit in the liver and even myosteatosis, and this will then lead to a pro-inflammatory condition, and it's a vicious cycle going on and on unless and until you intervene somewhere. So this NOFL or lean NASH is more common in our setting and usually associated with sarcopenia. It's basically your body composition which is more important than the total obesity, and where that obesity is a generalized one or a visceral one, and then certain genetic polymorphism are associated with it, and a different pattern of gut microbiota. The more and more the time goes on, I am more convinced that these are those bacteria and different pathogens in our intestine which play a role in all diseases rather than genetics or other things doing it. Probably they are directing us and they are controlling us. So once this happens, we don't know exactly, and it's a chicken egg situation, that the NAFLD and NASH will lead to insulin resistance, and insulin resistance will lead to NASH. So obesity and insulin resistance, we do know, are the main risk factors in the initiation, progression, and even in the HCC development. And hyperglycemia and hyperinsulinemia would increase the TGF and would also lead to hepatic stellate cell activations. We will discuss about these two in a while. And we also know that apoptosis signal regulating kinase 1 is a key enzyme in insulin resistance and inflammation in the NASH. We will also refer to this when we will discuss apoptosis. Now this is what happens. So we know that apoptosis single kinase is this enzyme from here. And this is from the reactive oxygen species from mitochondrial dysfunctions. This is basically your death receptors or TNF receptors. So this ASK1 would lead to C Jun N-terminal kinase or J and K. Normally what happens is this, the tyrosine phosphorylation of insulin would occur, and through this it will lead to the insulin X here. But in this condition, it leads to the serine phosphorylation and insulin resistance would occur. So low tyrosine phosphorylation and high serine would lead to this disbalance. And they will lead to increased free fatty acid, free cholesterol, and oxidized VLDL. We will come to that when we discuss lipotoxicity. Then adipokines. We also know that they are good friends and insulin sensitivity dependent on them, and they are anti-inflammatory. While TNF alpha and interleukin 6 or other pro-inflammatory markers would lead into the inflammation. So adipokines will also play a role in it. The lipotoxicity, these death receptors so-called, especially the free fatty acid and free fatty acid are important mediators of this, as we discussed previously. They upregulate these receptors and then would also sensitize them to the TNF alpha, and would lead to the endothelial reticular stress, which is an apoptotic intrinsic pathway as well, causing mitochondrial dysfunction and apoptosis. And of course, nobody is complete without an immunity, and the tolerant receptors would respond to free fatty acids and pathogen-associated molecular patterns to induce hepatic inflammation. And the inflammasomes are being formed and would lead to the damage in the form of mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress. Autophagy, an important factor or important function which is impaired, would lead to accumulations of the DAMPs, which called the damage-associated molecular patterns and hepatocytes. And what happens is this, through all these, not only these are upregulated, but this will also lead to the endothelial reticular stress and would lead to the reactive oxygen species mitochondrial dysfunctions and leading to the apoptosis. Now, this is one of the important things, and hepatocyte apoptosis necrosis. Apoptosis means a programmed cell death, which is increased normally in the NAFL, act as a danger signals and further aggravate hepatic inflammation. Now, the basic concepts of apoptosis would be is a key consequence of cell injury, and mitochondrial dysfunction is the key event. That's why it's in oxidative stress, and the AST and all that would come in. There are two pathways, in extrinsic and intrinsic one. The extrinsic this means that when something would activate from outside the cell through the receptors and then leading to dysfunction or activation of certain inflammatory markers, while the intrinsic one are from inside through the endothelial reticular stress. And the caspases and BCL2 families are also involved in these pathways. We will come to that in a while. Now, this is what happens. This is basically that your extrinsic pathway through this would lead to, these are basically the initiator caspase, and would lead to oxidative, reactive oxygen species production through increasing mitochondrial permeability, and then would produce effector caspases, and the other one, the BCL2, they are anti-apoptotic here, and the pro-apoptotic are also would come in here, and through the intrinsic pathway, this one, the free fatty acid, the free cholesterol, the ceramides, and other would initiate through endothelial receptors, reticular stress. So this is going on and would lead to apoptosis through the caspase. So I'm sure Dr. Bilal will be referring to these as well. Now, another interesting aspect of it is the role of farnesyde X receptors. We know that this is not only present in the liver, it's also present in the terminal alimentary intestine. And we do know that FXR inhibits triglyceride synthesis by inhibiting the sterol regulatory element binding protein 1C through here. And FXR also is not only doing that, but it also stimulates the beta oxidation activation and glycogenesis rather than glycogenolysis, and suppress glycolysis.